Okay, let's run a little thought experiment. It's a pretty dramatic one, but stick with me, because it's designed to help us really understand a fundamental truth. The ice on our planet is so much more than just frozen water. It's kind of the linchpin holding our entire world together, and we're about to see what would happen if it just disappeared. So let's just ask the question straight up. What if every single glacier, every ice sheet, all the snow on the highest mountain peaks, what if all of it melted in a single day? The consequences are, well, they're so huge it's almost impossible to imagine. To even start to wrap your head around the scale here, just look at this number. We're talking about 26.5 million cubic kilometers of ice. That is the colossal amount of frozen water that's currently keeping our world in a very, very delicate balance. Because you see, ice isn't just sitting there doing nothing. It's an active, dynamic system. It's like the planet's giant mirror, bouncing sunlight back out into space, which helps regulate our climate. And as we're going to see, it literally holds the memory of our planet's past.
So, if all that ice just vanished, what's the very first thing that would happen? Well, the most immediate, the most visually staggering consequence would be a global flood of truly unimaginable proportions. All that ice, that 26.5 million cubic kilometers of it, would pour straight into our oceans. The result? It would raise the global sea level by 70 meters. Yeah, 70. That's over 230 feet. To put that in perspective, look up at a 20-story building. That's how much extra water would be dumped on top of our coastlines.
And this, right here, shows you what that really means. It means the end of basically every coastal city you've ever heard of. New York, London, Shanghai, Tokyo, just gone. Entire fertile regions like the Nile and Ganges deltas that feed millions and millions of people would just disappear under the waves. The world map as we know it would be completely redrawn overnight. And the human cost? It's just staggering. Those lost coastlines are home to over 2 billion people. Their homes, their cities, their countries erased. This would trigger the single largest refugee crisis in all of human history, and it would happen in one day. But the disaster wouldn't stop at the water's edge. In fact, the flooding, that's just the opening act. The real catastrophe begins when the planet's entire climate system starts to completely unravel. It all starts with a key scientific principle, and it's called the albedo effect. It's actually pretty simple. White surfaces reflect heat. Dark surfaces absorb it. Right now, our polar ice caps are these giant white shields, reflecting sunlight away from us and keeping the planet cool. So when you replace that brilliant white reflective shield of ice with the dark absorbent surface of the open ocean, the planet immediately stops reflecting heat. Instead, it starts soaking it up like a giant dark sponge, which would dramatically accelerate global warming. And this kicks off a absolutely terrifying feedback loop. The more ice that melts, the less sunlight gets reflected. The less sunlight that's reflected, the more heat the oceans absorb. The more heat they absorb, the warmer the planet gets, which, in a normal scenario, would just cause even more ice to melt. In our overnight catastrophe, it just locks the Earth into a permanent hothouse state. But believe it or not, it gets worse. As the planet's cooling system completely fails, another, even more powerful threat is unleashed, something that's been locked away in the frozen ground for thousands of years. We're talking about permafrost. These are these huge areas of the Arctic that are basically a giant planetary freezer, and they're filled with ancient, undecayed plants and animals. And all that frozen organic matter contains carbon, a lot of it. How much? An estimated 1,700 gigatons. I mean, to put that in perspective for you, that is double the amount of carbon that's currently in our entire atmosphere. So the sudden thawing of all that permafrost would release that carbon, and not just as CO2, it would come out as methane, a greenhouse gas that's many, many times more powerful. Scientists have a name for this. They call it a methane bomb. A pulse of greenhouse gases so large, it would cause a catastrophic spike in global temperatures. Okay, so now we have a flooded world and a runaway greenhouse effect. This is the point where the planet's interconnected systems just start to fail, one after another, leading to total, unpredictable chaos. The jet streams that guide our weather would go haywire, unleashing superstorms and mega droughts. The fresh water from mountain glaciers would first cause these devastating floods,
And then it would be gone forever, drying up the rivers that billions of people rely on. Even the Earth's crust, suddenly relieved of the immense weight of those ice sheets, would start to rebound, triggering earthquakes and volcanic eruptions.
A massive flood of cold, fresh water into the North Atlantic would shut down the ocean currents that regulate our climate, like the Gulf Stream. And this creates a really weird paradox. While the rest of the globe gets hotter and hotter, Europe would actually plunge into a deep freeze. It's a perfect example of the kind of unpredictable chaos that would just take over.
Ultimately, no society, no country could withstand this. Agriculture would collapse, global trade would just stop as ports disappeared, economies would evaporate, nations would fall apart under the strain of resource wars and endless waves of refugees. The combined shock would simply be too much for civilization to bear. But beyond all the physical destruction, the fire and the floods, there's one final loss. It's a quieter one, but in some ways it's even more profound. We would lose the memory of our own planet. You see, the ancient ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica contain ice cores. These are a perfect, frozen record of Earth's atmosphere, stretching back 800,000 years. They're like a library of our planet's past. To melt them is to burn that library to the ground, erasing all the lessons of every climate shift, every volcanic eruption, every single chapter of Earth's story. And we have to be really clear about this. The overnight part of our story is a thought experiment, sure. But the melting itself, that is not science fiction. The forces that are shaping our world are already steering us down a much slower version of this exact same path.
Which leaves us with the final and really the most important question. This whole thought experiment shows us exactly what's at stake: a stable climate, our cities, our civilization. So the real question we have to face isn't if this process is happening. It's how fast are we going to let it happen?